We are now 4 weeks into this season of Epiphany, this season after Christmas where, like the Magi, we get to embark on a wild star journey. We're following the light of the holy stories from week to week to discover something more, something deeper about the mystery of God with us in Jesus the Christ. And today, as often happens on long journeys, we pass by some familiar signposts. Headed west, at the split, I-40 continues towards Nashville. If you're traveling to Chattanooga, be sure to merge onto I-75. Headed east, at the split, I-40 continues toward Asheville. Tri-Cities and Virginia, you're looking for I-81. Familiar signposts. We know the directions that surprise or confound other less experienced travelers of these roads. We can turn on our favorite road trip playlist or podcast or audiobook and not even fully realize when our car has made the turn, merging onto I-75, continuing onto I-40. We know the way. There's efficiency in that that's helpful for the journey, less chance of going the wrong way, keeping a more constant speed as you easily anticipate the lane changes. And there's also a gift of knowing the way, of visiting the familiar signposts. A space is opened to observe other things. Perhaps the brilliant or gray, as it may be, color of the sky, or the vegetation on the side of the road. Maybe space to enjoy a morning dance session with that favorite playlist you have going. There is always something else to discover in the familiar paths we travel. New journeys to take, deeper ones. To leave the road trip metaphor for a moment, we also experience the gift of the familiar in our pattern of worship, in our liturgy each week. The repeated words and prayers hold us, and they also open and allow a space for the Spirit to move and surprise and delight, even sometimes to overwhelm. Familiar signposts are gifts. And today, the wild star of our Epiphany journey hovers with that glowing light over the familiar Beatitudes. We welcome their comfortable rhythm. Blessed are the poor. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the peacemakers. We know these words. We know this way. We've traveled with the crowds before to this mountaintop. We've heard Jesus preach this sermon. In the Gospel of Matthew, the Beatitudes are Jesus' first teaching words. We have heard from Jesus before this 5th chapter. He speaks with John at his baptism. He dialogues and resists the devil in the wilderness. And last week we heard Jesus call the disciples. But it is in these words, this proclamation of blessings, that Jesus begins to teach the ones who follow him. Jesus starts with blessing. He has already shown this in his actions. After he calls the disciples, We are told that Jesus goes throughout Galilee, teaching and proclaiming the good news and curing every disease, every sickness among the people. The mystery of God with us in Jesus means Jesus proclaiming God's blessing in his physical body, with the words of his mouth and with the healing touch of his hands. Jesus has been walking and talking God's blessing into the world's least, last, and lost. It's why the crowds have formed. This mystery, this embodiment of God with us, has the people shaken from their daily lives and routines. What is this blessing? What is this mystery? What is this experience of knowing worth and dignity that the world does not freely give? And so, with the crowds formed and the disciples called, Jesus goes up the mountain to offer some words for what the people are experiencing. In his body, Jesus has offered the people the gift of God's blessing. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Words to describe that experience defy the imagination of the people. And so Jesus begins to preach and to share vocabulary for the mystery of God's kingdom come near. The Beatitudes, the blessings, the condition of great joy. These are not comfortable words. They are turn the world upside down words. Again, they're words that defy the imagination of the people. They didn't know that they could be put in this order and in this way, that the meek will know the condition of great joy. For they, the meek, will inherit the earth. Happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Each of these blessings, a reversal of what the world preaches and proclaims. Vocabulary shared by the Psalms and the prophets and brought near to the crowds by God with us, by Jesus the Christ. Jesus begins with blessing. In his actions and in his words, he begins with blessing, with healing for the poor, for those who mourn, for the meek. Jesus begins with blessing, not judgment, not lists of expectations. Come, let me tell you what's expected here before we begin to bless and to heal and to reconcile the world. Just blessing, embodied and proximate for the least, the last, and the lost. Jesus intends blessing that the world cannot give to be a signpost for all who follow him. Because the crowds have gathered, we have them here in the background, but we are told that Jesus is teaching his disciples, the ones who will follow him, and the ones who will act in his name. Jesus is telling Peter and Andrew, James and John that their ministry in the world is also with the least, the last, and the lost. The kingdom of heaven is known and experienced in showing mercy, in being loyal to God in thoughts and actions, and in actively working for peace. It begins with blessing. The kingdom of heaven is known and experienced in doing justice and in loving kindness. It begins with active and proximate blessing. The kingdom of heaven is known and experienced in acting in the world with the recognition that God has come to walk with us, to be in a body like ours. And so we are called to move and act in the world like we believe that, like we are walking with God. The holy comes to be with us in a body. Jesus blesses the crowds, blesses us in his body. And in doing so, Jesus reminds us that all bodies are holy. Every expression of humanity is a reflection of God with us, of Jesus come to be with us in a body. All bodies are worthy of blessing. Close, proximate, felt blessing. And the kingdom of heaven comes near when we work to make that true. When we hear the familiar words, and when we visit the familiar signposts, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, blessed are the peacemakers. When we hear those familiar signposts and choose to be transformed even more, to be pulled more deeply into the disciples of that God is calling us and that Jesus is teaching us to be. Blessed are you. Blessed am I. God is with us, and the world is groaning for the kingdom of heaven to be made near.